The anniversary cake was still cold in Caleb Mercer's hands when he found a steel chain across his parents' front door. A county notice covered the glass, unsafe, for occupancy. Behind it, the hallway was dark, the ceilings had buckled, and the two porch chairs where Thomas and Evelyn drank coffee every morning were gone. Caleb set the cake on the hood of his rental car and called Denise. The call went to voicemail. He tried Andre. Same result. They're not there. The woman next door stood beside her mailbox with a laundry basket. Where are they? She looked at the cake, then at the house. Maple Court extended stay. Room 14. Since when? 6 weeks. I thought one of you knew. At Maple Court, room 14 opened after his third knock. Thomas stood behind the door in his old forest green work jacket, now hanging loose. Neither man moved. Then Thomas looked past him at the crushed corner of the cake box. Your mother will say it still tastes the same. Evelyn rose from the bed. Surprise crossed her face, followed by the careful smile she used whenever she wanted two people not to argue. Caleb, you came. The room held 2 beds, a hot plate, 3 plastic storage bins, and a folding chair positioned between the bathroom and the window. Thomas turned sideways to pass it, favoring his left knee. Without speaking, Caleb moved the chair, shifted a bin beneath the television, and cleared a wider path to the bathroom. His father watched him. Still fixing traffic. Still standing in it, Caleb replied. It was the closest either of them came to a hug. Evelyn opened the cake box. The icing had folded into itself, erasing half of the words "Happy Anniversary." She cut the first slice with a plastic knife. One bin held folded clothes. Another held Thomas's tools. The third was labeled "Kitchen" in Evelyn's neat handwriting. Why didn't Denise tell me? He asked. She said the storm repairs were being handled. Evelyn's hand paused over the cake. Thomas lowered himself onto the bed. Andre had the contractor deposit. Caleb continued. I sent $2,400 every month. If that wasn't enough, you should called. You would have sent more, Thomas said. Of course I would. That's not what I said. Caleb pulled out his phone. I can move you tonight. There's a hotel near the interstate with accessible rooms. Or my assistant can find a house by. Put it away, Evelyn said. She did not raise her voice. That made him stop. She handed him the motel statement. A church assistance fund had covered the room through Monday morning. Checkout was at 11. After that, Thomas and Evelyn had nowhere confirmed to go. I called every Sunday, Caleb said, quieter now. Thomas looked toward the cleared path beside the folding chair. You called from airports. You called from cars. You asked if we needed anything, and before we could answer, Yo told us what you'd sent. Caleb opened his banking app. 12 transfers appeared in a clean green column. Everyone was marked completed. Where did it go? Evelyn pressed the lid back onto the damaged cake. Some of it kept us afloat. Some of it disappeared into promises, and some of it cost your sister more than money. Caleb looked from his mother to his father. Why didn't anybody tell me the truth? Thomas met his eyes at last. None of you knew, he said, because none of you asked. Before either parent could stop him, Caleb went downstairs and paid for another week. The motel clerk slid a receipt beneath the scratched plastic window. 7 nights cost more than his parents had once paid for a month of mortgage payments. Caleb signed without reading the total twice. When he returned, Evelyn was rinsing plastic forks in the bathroom sink. I handled Monday, he said, placing the receipt beside the cake box. You bought us 7 more nights in this room, she replied. That is not the same thing. It gives us time. It gives you time to make another decision before asking what we want. Caleb started to answer, but Thomas pulled a thick envelope from beneath the mattress. Inside were clinic notices, transportation slips, utility statements, and a calendar covered with Evelyn's small handwriting. Blue circles marked completed appointments. Red lines crossed through the ones they had missed. 3 in 1 month? Caleb asked. The county van only takes you from the curb, Thomas said. Some mornings I couldn't get down the steps without help. Where was Denise? At work, or trying to keep her job after leaving it too many times for us. Caleb looked at a missed pickup notice. The driver had waited 6 minutes. 6 minutes. That was how the county recorded it. There was no space so for Thomas struggling with his knee, Evelyn searching for the porch key, or Denise calling from the bus dispatch center to say her relief worker had not arrived. Andre was supposed to handle Tuesdays, Evelyn said. Sometimes he came. Sometimes? Thomas tapped 2 dates with 1 finger. Those times. Caleb turned to the bank statements. His transfers appeared regularly, but the money had been divided for property taxes, groceries, transportation, temporary roof covering, and payments to Mercer residential repair. Andre's company. Near the bottom of the envelope, Caleb found 3 invoices stamped PD. The first listed storm cleanup. The second listed roof stabilization. The third claimed that damaged interior walls had been removed. He drove back to the house with the papers on the passenger seat. Through the front window, he could still see swollen drywall leaning into the hallway. Damp insulation hung beneath the broken ceiling. At the rear of the house, a blue tarp had torn loose and twisted around the gutter. Caleb held the invoice against the glass as though the words might change. Work completed. He photographed the damage, then called the number printed at the bottom. A recorded message said the contractor's mailbox was full. By the time he returned to room 14, anger had given him something familiar to do. "I'm calling my attorney," he said. "If Andre billed for work he didn't perform, I'll recover every dollar. I can have an independent crew here tomorrow." Thomas closed the envelope. Evelyn remained beside the sink, drying the same fork she had already dried. "Did you hear anything we said?" "I heard that Andre took money meant for you. You heard the part you know how to fight." Caleb put his phone on the table but kept his hand around it. Evelyn told him what the bank records could not. For nearly 2 years, Denise had arrived before sunrise with groceries. She organized medication boxes, washed clothes, negotiated bills, waded through appointments, and returned to the dispatch center already exhausted. When Thomas stopped driving, everyone treated Denise's car like a family service that never closed. Andre promised weekends. Caleb sent money. Evelyn kept saying they were managing. Denise kept showing up until one Tuesday. She did not. "She left you here," Caleb said. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "And before that, we all left her carrying something none of us wanted to name." His phone began to ring. Andre appeared on the screen. Caleb answered immediately. "Where did the repair money go?" There was a pause filled with machinery and distant hammering. Andre did not deny receiving it. He did not ask how their father was doing or whether their mother still had enough clothes in the motel room. He asked only one question. "What did Mom tell you?" Caleb did not answer Andre's question. "Where are you?" "At a job. Send me the address." "Caleb, don't come down here angry." The line went dead. Denise's shift ended at 7. Caleb waited across from the Bellwether Transit Center until she emerged carrying an empty lunch container and a stack of route change notices. She saw him beside the rental car and stopped. "You found time to come home," she said. "That must mean somebody finally failed badly enough. I found Mom and Dad in a motel. And now you need someone to blame. You left them there." Denise glanced toward 2 drivers leaving the building. Not in the parking lot. She led him into an empty training room where faded route maps covered the walls. Instead of sitting, she opened a dented locker and removed a spiral notebook held together with a rubber band. Each page contained dates, appointment times, grocery lists, and initials. "Monday was mine," she said. "Tuesday was Andre. Wednesday was the county aide. I took Thursday, and we were supposed to divide Friday." Black crosses filled the Tuesday column. "Count them." Caleb counted 8 in 11 weeks. "Where were you?" he asked. "Covering Wednesday because Tuesday never happened." leaving work to replace groceries Andre didn't bring, picking Dad up when the clinic called because nobody came back for him. You could have told me. Denise laughed once, without humor. I was too busy doing the things you thought your transfer had handled. She turned several pages. 2 attendance warnings from the transit department were folded between them. A third absence would have placed her job under formal review. My daughter waited outside school twice because I was with Mom and Dad. My supervisor changed my schedule 3 times. I asked Andre for 1 dependable day. I asked you to come home. You never called me. Denise took his phone, entered a number, and handed it back. Caleb recognized it immediately. It was his old executive line, retired after his company moved its operations center 14 months earlier. The number still connected to a cloud voicemail archive, but it no longer forwarded messages to his current phone. He had never given his family the replacement. Caleb logged in. 6 unheard messages appeared. In the first, Denise sounded irritated. In the second, tired. By the fourth, her sentences had begun breaking apart. Dad missed another appointment. Andre didn't come. I can't keep leaving work like this. The final message was dated the Tuesday the county inspector condemned the house. Caleb, I need you to come home, not send something. Come home. I'm checking them into Maple Court tonight because the ceiling isn't safe and I have nothing left. The recording ended with the sound of Evelyn asking Denise whom she was calling. Caleb placed the phone on the table. I didn't hear them. I know. Why didn't you call my personal number? You never gave it to me. He looked away. Denise sat at last. I put 10 nights at Maple Court on my credit card. I filled the refrigerator. Then I went home, turned off my phone, and slept through most of Wednesday. When I woke up, I let Mom tell you the repairs were moving forward. So you lied. Yes, she did not soften it. I was ashamed that I had left them in that room. And I was angry enough to let you keep believing. Money made you the dependable one. From beneath the notebook, she pulled out a folded invoice from Mercer Residential Repair. Andre had given it to her the morning the house was condemned. It listed roof stabilization, electrical safety work, and interior demolition as completed. At the bottom was Denise's signature authorizing release of the remaining deposit. I signed without inspecting the work, she said. Andre told me his crew had finished. I was late for my shift, and I wanted one problem to be over. Caleb compared the invoice number with the copy from his father's envelope. They matched. Then Denise showed him a text Andre had sent that same morning. Everything finished. They can move back Friday. Friday had come and gone nearly 6 weeks earlier. Caleb folded the invoice carefully, but his hands were no longer steady. Denise watched him place it inside his jacket. If you're going to find Andre, she said, don't pretend he was the first person in this family to disappear. The county permit portal listed 1 active job under Mercer Residential Repair. Caleb reached the address 20 minutes later and found Andre's truck beside an unfinished bungalow. 2 workers carried scrap wood through a wall that still had no windows. Andre stood inside, measuring an empty frame. Caleb laid the paid invoice across a sawhorse. Show me which part of our parents' house looks completed. Andre waved the workers toward lunch, then removed his gloves. I was going to replace it. That isn't an answer. A client stopped payment on a renovation, $18,000. Payroll was due that Friday, so you used Mom and Dad's deposit, the first draw. I thought the client would pay Monday. He didn't. No. When the money did not arrive, the roofing supplier froze Andre's credit. He used part of the second draw to finish another job, hoping its payment would refill the account. The job ran late. The money never returned. Caleb tapped Denise's signature. You told her the work was finished. I told myself it was almost true. How much is left? $612. A loose sheet of plastic snapped against the outside wall. Andre rubbed dust from his palms. They stayed with me after the storm. 3 weeks. Mom and Dad never mentioned that. My apartment has stairs. Dad could barely climb them. Mom slept on the couch because he needed the bed near the bathroom. Every night he asked when the house would be ready. So you took them back before it was safe. I said the roof was stable. I needed a few more days. Andre stared at the invoice. Then the county inspector came. Caleb opened his contacts and found his attorney. Andre watched him. Call. I signed it. You submitted false invoices and took money from our parents. Yes. You could lose your license. Yes. Caleb's thumb hovered over the number. But don't tell yourself calling makes you the one who stayed, Andre said. When I told you the business was failing, you sent an accountant's number. Denise asked you to come home and got an old voicemail. You make disappearing look organized. Caleb closed his hand around the phone. Get in the car. At Maple Court, Andre stopped outside room 14 and wiped his boots on the concrete, though there was no mat. Evelyn opened the door before he knocked. Thomas remained beside the window. Andre placed the invoice and his bank statement on the table. I used the repair money for payroll, he said. I lied about the work. There's $612 left. Thomas looked at him. And the 3 weeks, Andre lowered his eyes. I took you home knowing it wasn't ready. Caleb lifted his phone. I'm calling the attorney. We can freeze the company account tonight. Evelyn stepped between the brothers and closed her hand around Caleb's wrist. You will not decide our family without us again. Even Andre looked surprised. Thomas pulled the motel notepad toward him. Tomorrow, 6 o'clock, the fellowship room at Bellwether Community Chapel. All of us? Caleb asked. All 3 of our children, Evelyn said. Denise too. Thomas wrote 3 rules beneath the time. No lawyers for the first hour, no new transfers, and no one gets to say they were busy. Evelyn released Caleb's wrist only after he lowered the phone. Andre sat on the edge of the second bed. Caleb turned off the attorney's number and placed the phone face down beside the unpaid statement. The decision was no longer his. At 6 the next evening, 5 folding chairs circled a card table in the chapel fellowship room. Denise's notebook, Andre's bank statement, Caleb Sibb's transfer records, and the false invoices lay between them. Evelyn closed the door. We are not choosing which child failed us least. We are deciding whether we can trust any of you with what happens next. Caleb's phone vibrated.
Thomas tapped the 3rd rule on the motel notepad.
No one gets to say they were busy. Caleb placed the phone face down beneath his chair. Denise started with the missed Tuesdays, the shifts she had left, and the warnings from her supervisor. Then she reached the night of the county inspection. I paid for 10 nights at Maple Court and filled the refrigerator, she said. After that, I stopped answering. Why? Evelyn asked. Because if I heard your voice, I knew I would go back. I was exhausted, and I had started resenting you for needing me. That explains why I left. It does not excuse it. Thomas drew one line. Andre pushed his bank statement into Mercer. The repair deposit had arrived on a Friday. Payroll left the same afternoon. I spent money that was not mine, he said. I wrote completed on work I had not started. Then I waited for another job to make the lie temporary. You also took us back to an unsafe house, Thomas said. Andre lowered his eyes. Because I wanted you out of my apartment, and I was ashamed to admit it. Thomas drew a second line. 12 transfers made the cleanest record on Caleb's side of the table. Evelyn turned Denise's call log toward him. His final payment had arrived 11 minutes after the voicemails asking him to come home. Why did she have the wrong number? Evelyn asked. Caleb looked at Thomas. Years earlier, his father had questioned the debt and risk behind Caleb's new company. When Caleb left for Colorado, Thomas had said, "Don't come home expecting us to repair every risk you take." I kept that sentence, Caleb said. I threw away everything around it. I was afraid for you, Thomas replied. I made fear sound like I had no faith in you, and I punished everybody for it. Caleb opened the family message thread and showed them the muted symbol beside its name. I silenced it 2 years ago. Every message felt like that argument starting again. I decided that if I sent enough money, no one could call me absent. Evelyn did not rescue him from the silence. Caleb locked the screen. I was absent. Thomas drew the third line, then added 2 more. He admitted hiding how bad his knee had become. Evelyn admitted saying they were managing because she feared the truth would split the family. The records no longer pointed toward one guilty person. Every excuse had produced the same result. Thomas and Evelyn alone in room 14. At 7, Thomas turned the notepad around. The first hour is over. Caleb removed a set of account forms from his folder. Future repair money will be controlled by you and Mom, he said. You approve every payment. Andre has no access. You also decide whether the invoices go to an attorney or the licensing board. Andre flinched but remained silent. What do you get? Thomas asked. No control? Caleb signed the authorization and slid the forms across the table. Evelyn rested her hand on them without taking them. Help is not only money. I know. Do you? The phone vibrated again beneath Caleb's chair. He left it there. I'm listening. Thomas gathered the invoices. Evelyn gathered the call logs. Neither accepted the forms. We will decide by morning what help looks like, she said, and whether any of you are part of it. At 8:10 the next morning, Caleb stood outside room 14 with a rental application in one hand and a flight confirmation in the other. His parents had made their decision. We are not moving to Colorado, Evelyn said. The house has a bedroom downstairs, accessible bathrooms, a driver, and none of our doctors, friends, or memories, Thomas replied. A safe house can still be the wrong home. Caleb's phone vibrated. The executive committee expected him in Denver before noon to complete a leadership transition he had spent 11 months negotiating. Missing it could reduce his role in the company he had built. He reached for the phone. Evelyn placed another application over it. A 1-story rental stood 4 blocks from the chapel, with a ramp and a month-to-month lease. The property manager needed an answer before noon. We want to see this one, she said. Then we decide. At 10, all 5 Mercers met outside the small brick house. Thomas tested the handrail before climbing the ramp. Inside, he walked from the bedroom to the bathroom without turning sideways. Evelyn opened the kitchen cabinets and asked who handled emergency repairs. Caleb began discussing a cash purchase. No, Thomas said. I could close quickly. You can help with the deposit. You cannot buy the decision. Caleb stopped. All right. It was the first offer he had withdrawn, without replacing it with a larger one. They gathered around the empty kitchen counter. Evelyn placed the account forms in front of her. She and Thomas would control every repair dollar. 3 licensed contractors would inspect the damaged house and subbids directly to them. Denise committed to Wednesday evenings and Saturday mornings. A county aide would cover Monday. Transportation would be booked in writings instead of assumed. I can do more, Denise said. We need what you can keep doing, Evelyn replied. Andre signed restitution terms for the missing deposit. He surrendered access to the repair account and agreed that his company would not work on the house. Thomas watched him date the page. Repaying us does not restore trust. I know. It begins a record. Caleb's phone rang again. This time he answered. I won't make the meeting, he told the board chair. The reply was loud enough that Denise looked toward him. I understand what it may cost. Proceed without me if you have to. He ended the call. Thomas frowned. We did not ask you to lose your company. You asked me to stay for the decision and the move. The movers can handle it. They can. I'm staying anyway. Evelyn studied him. Just today? Caleb looked at the flight confirmation. Today is the day I can promise. At 10:57, Thomas and Evelyn signed the lease in their own names. Caleb transferred the deposit into the account they controlled, then handed his mother the phone so she could verify it herself. By afternoon, room 14 was empty. Denise carried the clothes. Andre loaded the kitchen bin. Caleb lifted Thomas's tools, surprised by their weight. At the rental, Evelyn directed every box. Thomas chose the chair beside the window. A handwritten schedule went onto the refrigerator with 3 names beside specific days and times. Caleb's screen lit with a message. The executive committee had proceeded without him. He turned it face down on the counter. Thomas has held out the spare key. This does not mean anything is fixed. I know. Good. He placed the key in Caleb's palm. Come back Tuesday, even if nothing is wrong. Caleb returned the following Tuesday at 4:17. Nothing was wrong. No appointment had been missed. No bill needed paying. Thomas was sitting beside the window, repairing the loose hinge on Evelyn's recipe box. "You're late," he said. 17 minutes. I noticed. Caleb waited for the criticism that usually followed, but Thomas handed him a screwdriver instead. They worked without discussing the company, the damaged house, or the argument that had kept them apart for years. It was not forgiveness. It was Tuesday. 4 months later, licensed contractors were replacing the last section of wiring in the family house. Evelyn visited every Friday with a clipboard, while Thomas questioned each invoice until the project manager began bringing itemized receipts before being asked. Andre was not allowed to enter the repair account. He sent restitution payments on the first of each month. The first 2 arrived on time. The third came 9 days late. Instead of hiding, he called Thomas. "I lost a job," Andre said. "I can make half today and the rest next Friday."
Thomas looked at the calendar.
"Then that is what the record will show." Andre paid the balance when he promised. He had not regained his contractor license or his parents' financial trust. He still came on Sundays, however, carrying groceries he bought with his own money. Some weeks, Thomas invited him inside. Other weeks, he accepted the bags at the door. Andre kept returning. Denise kept the schedule taped to her refrigerator. She no longer volunteered for every emergency. When the county aide canceled one Monday, she called her brothers instead of leaving work automatically. Andre covered the morning. Caleb rearranged a flight and handled the afternoon appointment by video until Andre arrived. For the first time, Denise's supervisor received no last-minute absence notice. On Saturdays, she and Evelyn walked through the damaged house, deciding what could be saved. Denise found the old kitchen curtains sealed inside a storage bag. "They're faded," she said. "So am I," Evelyn replied. "Wash them." Both women laughed, and the sound carried through rooms that had been silent for months. Caleb did lose the leadership transition. The board appointed someone else to the operating role and reduced his daily authority. For several weeks, he woke before dawn, reaching for problems that no longer belonged to him. He could have fought the decision. His attorney prepared 3 possible responses. Caleb read them, closed the file, and accepted a narrower position as founder and strategic advisor. It cost him influence, pride, and the version of success that had always required him to be unavailable. He began spending 1 week each month in Bellwether. When he could not come, he called at 7 on Sunday evening from the same chair in his apartment, never from an airport or a moving car. Sometimes his parents needed money. More often, Thomas wanted help reading a medical form, and Evelyn wanted to know whether Caleb had eaten anything that did not arrive in a cardboard container. Caleb learned to ask, "Do you want help, advice, or just company?" The first time, Thomas answered, "Silence." So Caleb stayed on the line while his father sorted a box of screws. The family moved back into the repaired house in early November. There was no celebration large enough to hide what had happened. Denise brought dinner. Andre installed nothing, touched no invoice, and carried boxes where Evelyn directed him. Caleb returned the spare rental key after Thomas checked every room twice. After dinner, Caleb opened his laptop at the kitchen table when Evelyn began collecting the plates. "I can arrange for someone to clean tomorrow," he said. She placed a dish towel over the screen. "No, I was only trying to. I know. She handed him the towel. Dry, don't solve. At the sink, Thomas washed each plate and passed it to his son. Their shoulders touched occasionally, then separated again. Neither man apologized for the old argument. Neither pretended the years between them had disappeared. In the living room, Caleb's phone vibrated inside his coat. He heard it. So did his parents. Thomas passed him another wet plate. Caleb dried it, placed it in the cabinet, and remained beside them. What does real presence look like in your family when money is no longer the answer? Subscribe for more original Hush stories.